So I got the. I'm Cork Snyder. In case you're a visitor, this is my 37th year teaching. I teach statistics. I've been a basketball coach and an athletic director most of my career. And today I got the call from the bullpen. I said to bring the right-hander in, so I'm happy to be here. I have to. My favorite part of the service by far is all the little kid stuff when they go to collect the trash and the absolute confusion and watching Beck over there like, go over there, get over there. Just the leadership skills. It just cracks me up how they suddenly take charge. And then when they give the money, all the high-fiving and the waving goodbye to their parents as if they're going on like a cruise or something. You know, I just have to laugh at all that stuff. Whoever thought of doing all that is a genius. I was a couple years ago, I came up in one of those meetings we have in November about stuff. So quick plug for the podcast that myself and David do. Daryl's was released on Friday, I think, right? Is that released on Friday? Yeah, I think it was released on Friday. So we release like every other week. So if you want to get to know your newest elder more, that's great. Nick Marks has come out in a couple weeks. Preston, great job up here, by the way. That was really good. He's in about a month or so. And then David and I did a debate on Mordecai on one of our podcasts. Did Mordecai make the right decision in standing up as people in peril, or could he have handled that a different way? It's kind of a cool little topic. So we're having fun with this. And then this morning when Alicia mentioned the Tom Owens story, I thought, oh, we got to get that on tape just for everybody to listen to. So that would be great. So thanks, you guys. All right, so I wanted to talk to you about, everything is instant in our world. And I got this idea listening to Billy Graham the other day. And I'm a huge Billy Graham fan. I'm a huge Sirius XM fan. I have to say, most of my Sirius XM work is on baseball games, but I do also listen to the Billy Graham channel. He's awesome. So for $12 a month, you can have that all 24 hours a day. And he had a really good sermon on everything being instant. And I don't think, he had any idea how instant things would become in our society and how difficult that is for us. We obviously have artificial intelligence. Everything. We got influencers now that can make money very quickly. We got kids that'll transfer colleges if they're not getting the right playing time. They'll immediately leave. Everybody wants everything quickly. And I'm not saying that's all bad. I'm not a guy that denies modernization. This is the realities of our life. But let me read this to you. Psychologists say that quick success is more likely to lead to hubris, or to thinking that your success was skill, not luck. You know that the risk, that telling the difference between risk and luck is kind of hard to sort out at times. And there's a real strong study that's out the stock market. There's evidence that people that do well early in their career in picking stocks end up giving it back and then some compared to those that start off modestly. So I really think, in general, the instantness of our world can be a little eroding because I don't think it really roots you and develops you as much as waiting a long time does. So, for the most part, Christianity is a very slow growth process. Marriage is a slow build. Building a strong base in anything takes time. So let's go through some famous examples. Warren Buffett. He amassed 90% of his fortune after age 80. So that's absolutely incredible. J.K. Rowling of Harry Potter fame. I have not read one of the books. I have not seen one of the movies, but my daughter has read every single one of them. So she was turned down by 12 publishers. Colonel Sanders, Kentucky Fried Chicken, didn't succeed until he was 65. Probably because he dressed like that. No, I don't know, but... And then Bryan Cranston of that Breaking Bad series, he was in his late 50s before he finally kind of broke through as an actor. Obviously, we can go on and on and on, but I do want to give you 6 biblical figures that took a while to develop. And I have 2 goals for you, okay? One, to see the remaining days of your life as possible preparation for saving someone, even if your remaining days are only to save one person. Just the rest of your life, if you're here just for one more person, it's worth it. And two, to realize that God, in all likelihood, will use you in a way you did not expect. And that's very, very true for me. I think of our adopted daughter, Ashley. Most of you guys, she hasn't been around. She lives in Oklahoma, but we did not expect that at all. We were looking to adopt, and then suddenly I had a student that needed a home, and she was 15 in my class, great kid, and we took her. Just a real, but it was clear that God had developed me for that moment. So, you guys those are my two goals for you. Let me go back here real quick. I do want to talk to you about how I daily prepare for these moments. So on my desk at school, when I walk in, I have 3 cards on my desk, and I ask myself 3 questions every day. The first 2 wouldn't be probably relevant to you, but one is, if my job were to open today, would they actually hire me? I ask myself that every day. Am I the best person still? 2, would I want to be coached by myself? I ask myself that every day. But number 3 is the one you should use. Who needs me today? I ask myself that every single morning to put my mind in the right frame of mind. Because you'll be shocked if you ask yourself who needs me. You'll see people. You'll start seeing it. Okay? All right, so let's talk about Paul. You talk about a guy that took a while to develop. So Paul, as you know, was Saul and was a persecutor of Christians. And he ended up, when he had his dramatic conversion on the road to Damascus, he didn't go immediately to Jerusalem to consult with the other apostles. Instead, in Galatians 1, 17 and 18, he probably spent some time in Arabia. It's only one verse, but they think it was about 3 years. Okay? Then, after those initial 3 years, Paul went to Jerusalem for a brief visit, about 15 days, to see Peter and James. And that's in Galatians. That's just like the next verse in Galatians. And then he returned to his hometown of Tarsus and ministered in those regions of Syria and Cilicia. We think that was about 8 to 14 years. So conservatively, you're talking about 15 years of development. That's not instant Christianity. He took a while to develop. And then, of course, he ended up writing 2/3 of the Bible, of the New Testament anyways. I'm going to give you a modern example of kind of who I see as a Saul figure. This is Chuck Colson. If I remember correctly, Greg wrote and did a communion talk on him, if I remember correctly. And Chuck Colson was a guy that was, he was a key figure in the Nixon administration. And he was known as Richard Nixon's hatchet man. He was really aggressive and very unethical. He was deeply involved in the Watergate scandal. Well, after he got arrested and went to prison, he had a dramatic conversion to Christianity in prison, kind of like Paul. And he ended up developing a foundation called Prison Fellowship, a ministry dedicated to serving prisoners, ex-prisoners, and their families. He became a real leading voice for prison reform and social justice in that area. So you talk about I got to go well to develop. That's Chuck Colson. All right, the most famous person that wasn't instant is Moses. That's a great picture of Moses. I think it's an Apple Watch he's wearing on the, it's like an Apple, yeah. It's a very modern interpretation of. So Moses is such a famous story. We can go through very quickly, but his first 40 years are in the royal courts of Egypt, being educated. Then, remember, he kills the Egyptian and then fled to Midian for 40 years. So I don't know exactly what he's doing for 40 years in Midian. Obviously, he got married, tending to sheep in the wilderness, etc. That's basically Exodus 2:15 to 3:1. But why he was sent away for that long is a mystery. But he does come back at 80, of course, and leads the people out of Egypt. that is a long development period. So if you're waiting for your call or for your cause, you're probably not going to wait as long as Moses. Now this one, Nelson Mandela, to me, was kind of a little bit of a comparison there as well. He's famous. He's an anti-apartheid activist, and in his early 20s, he became involved in the movement in 1944. He ends up trying to overthrow the government. He spent 27 years in prison. 27 years in prison. And we heard a story about 30 years in prison earlier from Tom Owen. So that is a long, long time to wait and to develop. And I'm going to get to something that I ran across that was really beautiful. How do people wait so long? What is the key to this? I'm going to run across that in a little bit. Obviously, he's released from prison, and he goes back into political life. He gets the Nobel Peace Prize in 93, and in 1994, he's elected the first black president of South Africa, which was absolutely amazing. He was a Christian. I find it interesting that God develops this all differently. Paul was kind of sent home to Tarsus to develop, okay? For some reason. Paul's very social. He needs people to talk to. Moses was sent away to develop. We're all different. And, Moses was probably on the shyer end, despite the movie where Charlton Heston has the greatest voice ever. He was a stutterer, so maybe for whatever reason, it was best that he was probably isolated. Yeah, I don't know the reasons for all this, but we do know that if you need to believe that God is developing you at all times. That's something that I always tell myself every day. God is working in me right now to develop me, and I convince myself that every single day. All right, Ruth. Let's talk about Ruth. So Ruth, as you know, was a Moabite woman who married an Israelite man. And her husband, father-in-law, and brother-in-law all died, and she's left a childless widow. So she's an outsider. And she ends up staying connected to Naomi, her mother-in-law, and that famous line, where you go, I will go, your people will be my people. It's used at all the weddings, but it was actually two girls talking, but it's used at all of our weddings, okay. And then she ends up, as you know, catching the eye of Boaz, and she ends up in the line of King David and ultimately in the genealogy of Jesus Christ. I don't think Ruth was thinking about all that when she was just being dedicated to Naomi. She was thinking about all that. So here's one for you, historically. This is, on the left, Anna Murray Douglas. She, of course, is the wife to the more famous Frederick Douglass of the abolitionist movement. She was wealthy, a bit wealthy, and lived in the North. And she ended up leaving her family and friends and traveled from Baltimore, New York, and buying his way out of slavery. And most people, and they were part of the Underground Railroad, and most people believe that Frederick Douglass would have had no chance had it not been for her. So there's that kind of comparable story. All right, David. Have you guys seen The House of David? It's very, very good. Some of it's a little like ridiculous. Like my favorite ridiculous part is when Mikhail, his first wife, follows him to the battlefield and kisses him and says, "Go kill that giant." I'm thinking, that did not happen. I looked for that. But it's such a great scene. Like, she travels on horseback for 4 days and gets there. I'm like, Hollywood really, yeah. And Sandy and I, my wife and I, watched the movie of Esther last night just to get in the mood for this. Esther, it was 1960, and Joan Collins is Esther. So if you're younger than like 50, maybe you don't know who Joan Collins is, but she's Esther. And the movie is like, it's really bad, but it's so bad it's good. You know what I mean? I'm talking about that. You just laugh the whole time. So anyway, I highly recommend, for entertainment purposes only, Esther. Okay, so David. So David was anointed king, and if you watch The House of David, they do a great job of showing this. He's appointed king as a kid, and by the way, he's the youngest. And if you don't know, psychologists and statistics usually show that it's really hard for the youngest person to develop leadership skills. It's the most difficult. Obviously, the oldest has an advantage. They're leaders instantly. Okay? So I'm assuming David there's no way of thinking he was going to be king. And when he is anointed king, he probably doesn't know for about 20 years because he's eventually the king at age 30, and he's probably anointed maybe, I don't know, 10 to 13, somewhere in there. I don't know. But he obviously, again, the house of David does a good job of showing him living in Saul's castle and kind of maybe some of the jobs that he had and some of the stresses that he has. But of course, he's on the run, for 15 years or so. And we talked about that this morning too, about how reverential he was to Saul, despite the fact he could have killed him on multiple occasions. Well, we got one going on right now. I just thought this guy is interesting. I'm not taking a political stance. I'm not interested in that. But this guy has an unexpected rise as well. Okay, from comedian, complete outsider to politics. He's defying a giant as we speak. He has human flaws like David. He's done some things that are a bit questionable as well. But these examples are out there. As I go through some of this, I hope you don't think that you're going to end up being like some famous person eventually through God. But, the reality is our lives are going to develop, and we're going to affect at least one more person. And this happened to me the other day. As you heard me talk before, my best friend died a couple years ago. His dad had a stroke just recently. He's in his 90s. He's in a home, and he won't come out of that home. I went and saw him Friday. I walk in, hey Hal, it's just a house home, like when they convert it to a medical facility. So the corner, it's right by the Orange Mall. So I walk in and they're having dinner, and I'm talking to Hal, and this gentleman is there, and he's feeding his wife. And I started talking to him, and he happened to be Jewish. He happened to be from Israel, and there's a fun story with that, but I won't tell you that part. But come to find out, he has shown up every day for 2.5 years to feed his wife lunch and dinner. And I thought, to me, it was very motivating. I said to myself, if I'm called upon, I can do that. I've seen that. So there's a guy who influenced me and doesn't even know it. So we can influence others with our actions. So, and if I see him again, I'm going to tell him that. It didn't really hit me until I got in the car. What an incredible example that guy was. That's more likely going to be us. We're going to do things behind the scenes for others. We are being prepared as we speak. All right. Joseph and the Technicolor coat. He looks a little older in that one, I think. I think he was a younger guy, but Okay, so, and you guys know this story as well. This guy he's close to the youngest in his child. He was a dreamer. He went through betrayal and suffering. He had unwavering integrity with Potiphar's wife. He had a unique skill or gift in interpreting dreams. He rose from obscurity to power. He was a savior to his people, but most importantly, he's an example of forgiveness and reconciliation, as you guys know, when his brothers came to town looking for food, etc. This guy, to me, is a little bit like that. Viktor Frankl, and I've mentioned Greg before, I think you've also done a communion talk with Viktor Frankl. Yeah, okay. I've heard somebody talk about this. This guy is great. So this guy's he's a lot of things, but I'm going to focus. He's a psychologist. He was also he was part of the Holocaust experience. He lost pretty much everybody in his wife, his parents, etc. He's from Austria. When he got out of when the war ended, he wrote a book in 9 days called Man's Search for Meaning. Okay, and in it, I'm going to read this. He came to a profound conclusion. Those who had a why to live for, a purpose, a love, or a future task, were more likely to survive even in the most dehumanizing conditions. And I think of that every day when I say to myself, who needs me? I have a why every day. And I accept the fact that no matter what I'm going through, God is developing me for a future task. I really believe that. And I think if you believe those things, well, studies show you are more likely to capitalize on that. And it's kind of the only way of living. to me. If you just live day to day and don't think of today's experiences as having meaning for later, I think you're missing out. Okay? And he went through the same thing that Joseph did, betrayal and suffering. He had incredible integrity. He ended up lecturing at over 200 universities around the world, authored 40 books, and received 29 honorary doctorates. Yeah, pretty amazing. And, okay, next one is Queen Esther. I told you about the movie. See it, don't see it, I don't know. It's kind of. Okay, so anyhow, I really wanted Queen Esther in this because of the line in Esther 4:14 from Mordecai. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this. Isn't it cool to think of your life as for such a time as this? And I've had some of those moments. In 2003, I had a kid that needed a new kidney. He was struggling in class, and I'm a bike rider, and I decided, hey, I can ride my bike across the country, raise a bunch of money for you. And I did, just for such a time as this. My bike riding has been used so many times for people. It's the silliest thing. It's just riding a bike, but it can be used if you're looking for it. And I kind of compared her to, this is Irena Sendler. She is from World War II. She was a Polish social worker, just a social worker, but she organized a network of rescuers to save over 2,500 Jewish children from the Warsaw Ghetto. She smuggled them, this is clever, in ambulances, coffins, and through sewer systems, often placing them in non-Jewish homes with new identities. She risked her life like Esther did, incredible courage, and she's pretty famous. All right, so what do all of these late bloomers have in common besides the waiting? They didn't know what their calling really was for, but God was preparing them. David had no idea as the youngest child he would be the king. Chuck Colson was a political hatchet man. There's no way he thought he'd be a prisoner reformer and baptize Christians. Ruth, a Moabite woman, ended up in David's line and thus in the line of Jesus. Vladimir Zelensky, we don't know how it's going to play out. Paul, a persecutor of Christians and author of 2/3 of the New Testament. Esther was a beautiful face. She had no idea she would save a nation. And Irena Sendler was a social worker. And for me, I'm a couple years from retirement. Some of you are my age. I am also in that phase of what's next for me. And I'm waiting anxiously to see what God has for me because I don't know. And I anxiously await and anxiously prepared. But my simple advice to you as we leave here today, be open to what God calls you to do, because it's probably not going to be what you expected. Constantly try to improve and see every day as preparation for something. And 3, ask yourself each day, who needs me? All right, so that's all from me. If you guys have any questions for me or any of the men up here, you can come on up as we stand and sing.